So now you're going towards Normandy. What's that like from your point of view?
Well, I was in the mortar platoon, you know, the mortars, eh? And we had a landing craft tank with two armored bulldozers in front of us. And they had big long ropes with a grappling hook in front. And they had two sappers for each bulldozer. And a sapper is the same as an infantryman. The engineers, they call them sappers. And their idea was that we were supposed to land 2 minutes before the infantry landed with their boats. The bulldozer would go off. They had this big long ropes, and the sappers would hook on the ropes to these obstacles that were in the water, you know, big obstacles were in the water, and drag them off. The only problem is our boat got hit on the way in and got disabled, and they had trouble lowering the ramp. And so when they got in close, they said, "It's time to get off the boat." We said, "You're not on shore. We're as far as we can go. You'll be okay." So uh, the first two Brenton carrier, the bulldozers went off. They went okay because they were built higher and they had extra cover for going in the water. They had an extra 2 feet, and they had a snorkel so they could breathe. They went in and they ordered us off. We went off and we sank because the water was 6 feet deep, and we're only allowed to go in water 4 feet. So the first thing we did hit the water, we had to start swimming. It was kind of rough because there's a lot of things going on like firing, machine gun fire and artillery fire. So and then you had to swim in. It was kind of cold. Yeah, and I got to the let's see, I saw what was happening in our carrier. We because I was a part of the mortar group, I was number one. I had to carry a big base plate, 42 pounds, and when I saw what was happening, as the hell with the base plate, I can't carry that and sink in the water. So I flopped in. I got into shore, and a couple of guys lying in the water. I pulled them out. One was a guy I knew was Corporal Scaife, and so since I had no weapon, and he was mortally wounded, I took his Sten gun and I rolled him over and took his pack. So I had his pack. I only had the pack for about an hour because after we got to the sand dunes, we had to move inland, and I forgot to pack. But I still had his Sten gun with the extra ammunition, but I forgot his pack. So that was a noisy, a lot of firing going on, and a very wet landing, a very wet landing. So I feel lucky to get finished. I got Corporal Scaife and Corporal Martin up to a sand dune. I pulled Corporal Martin, but he was mortally wounded, and he said, "Hold me, I'm cold." So I held him, and he was dying. He's mortally wounded. He said, "Hold me, cold." So I held him in my arms when he passed away. Uh, and then we had to move inland. I left him there. Then I went inland, and since we lost our two sections, we had carriers with mortars on and a bunch of bombs, and the bombs were 10-pound bombs each, with 60 pounds in each, 60 bombs in each carrier, and we lost the carriers, so the sergeant major, regimental sergeant majors, organized the things to go in, and he knew me as a kid. He was a neighborhood cop in Winnipeg. He was a neighborhood policeman. He knew. He said, "Hey Jimmy, get over there, jump in the other carrier and get up there." So I'll never forget him saying, "Hey Jimmy, jump in that carrier and get up there." He knew me pretty well, a neighborhood policeman. And we got into once we got in a bit further, we got into a place called Putot, Putot, and we got in there and we dug in. And once we got past the shore, there's, there wasn't any much artillery fire. There's many snipers you had to worry about, and you'd zero in on the snipers, and they'd fire a lot of machine gun fire in the area they thought there he was to quieten them down, and maybe kill the guy or something. But it was when we got in the village of Bateau, and we dug in. He says there might be a counterattack, so At that time, that was June the 8th, 2 days later. The, the German 12th SS Panzer Division, the Panzer is a tank. The whole division, they launched an attack on Puteaux and Bretteville, which are side by side. And it was a hairy place. The only way I can describe it, you didn't know who was where, you know. It's like the Scarlet Pimpernel. I see them here, I see them there, I see them everywhere, that sort of thing. There were, and we managed to, you go around the corner, you just stick your machine gun around the corner first and fire first, then go around the corner. And that was a hairy thing because we lost quite a few guys on the landing. We got reinforcements on the same evening. They only been with us a day and a half, and they got involved in a counterattack. So some of the guys, they only with us about a day and a half, and they were gone. Well, I remember being up by the sand dune, and wondering, I volunteered to come here. I'll never forget that. I often think of that now, and I think I volunteered to go. What the heck am I doing here? Because it was so scary, and you never know what's next, eh? And how do I get out of here? There's one guy we got shelled pretty bad. One guy got a bit berserk. He's running around out in the open. He said, I want to go back to the beach. I want to go back to the beach. And so somebody had to tackle him, bring him down, because he was all confused, the shell fire. Because I remember the shell landed to me at Carpiquet. It landed right on the edge of the trench, and all I remember is a flash. I didn't hear it coming. I just they were shelling us. It was a big flash. Next I know, somebody's grabbing my helmet and pulling it up. It blew in the dirt on top of me and on top of the other guy, but he got the dirt off him. And he was digging for my helmet. He grabbed my helmet and he gave me the yank, give me the yank in my chin. It woke me up. Yeah.
What was it like securing the beaches and securing those bunkers and the Germans there?
Well, our job was when we landed, the infantry companies were doing that, and I went up to. I think about this Bob Hussey and one of my partners in our mortar crew. We ran to this pillbox, and we stood by the pillbox. We figured, well, we thought the pillbox was already taken. And what happened? We're standing there for about 10 minutes and waiting for the rest to come in. And this engineer guy come in. He says, "What's going on here?" He says, I said, "What's inside the pillbox?" I said, "We don't know yet." So he went in the pillbox. He brought out 5 German prisoners. They were there. They were keeping quiet because they didn't want to get shot, But they were there. 5 of them, yeah. And one of them was a Mongolian, because the Germans captured people and they got them into the army. And one guy was from Poland. You can tell a Mongolian because he looked like a Mongolian, right? And the guy from Polish, well, we had a few guys in our unit who speak Polish. So he spoke to him. And what he did is we had the Polish Army Division come in. They took him and they put him in the Polish Army Division. So from there on in, any Polish soldier that was captured from the German army, they went into the Polish Army Division. Yeah, because they were conscripted. Yeah.
What was the Mongolian soldier like?
Well, the only ones I know about, they were tall, and they looked like Mongolians. You had the Asiatic look, and they just stood there, and they couldn't speak English, and we couldn't speak Mongolian. So what the heck? So somebody offered them a cigarette. They took the cigarette, so on. Yeah. Major action was right on the beach itself. We got past the beach. It's very quiet, only sniper fire. Then we made our way to the beach, the place called Puteaux. And that's where the Germans launched a counterattack. but in between was mainly sniper fire. We got more and more reinforcements, more tanks were landed, and more self-propelled guns were landed. You know what a self-propelled gun is, eh? Yeah, they were coming. And see, when you first go into action, a lot of things we did you wouldn't do a week or two later or a day or two later. These self-propelled guns came right up beside us, where they should have been behind us, because you're up beside us, and any tank gun can take them out. Okay? Anything. So I remember they come up beside us, and there's a big church. They said there's snipers in the church. So we were firing, and the Navy we were doing some firing, and they got a big plaque there right now, and it said that they knocked out the church, but they didn't knock out the church because we were there beside this artillery, self-propelled artillery, and they knocked the church out. The Navy were firing shells over, landing nearby, and they took credit. They got a big plaque to how they knocked out the church, but they didn't knock it out. This infantry regiment number 42, they're the ones that knocked it out. Yeah.
What was the counterattack like by the Hitler Youth and the SS soldiers?
Well, that was there's a lot of firing going on, and that's the first time we heard the moaning minis. You heard of the moaning minis? Yeah, that's a 6-barrel mortar firing rockets, and they make a loud sound one after another. So the 6 of them go. So they had a lot of the first time we heard they called them the Nebel Worker. And the first time we heard the moaning minis. What the hell is that? And they'd fire the shells and they'd land in an area spread out. They wouldn't land in the same place. They'd go up in the air and they'd spread out. 100-pound shell and 125-pound shell. So they're pretty heavy stuff.
How long was that counterattack for?
Well, that's hard to say. We last a few hours, I imagine. Yeah.
So after that counterattack, what happens with you and your unit?
Well, we gathered in reinforcements and incorporated them into our unit. But we're 56 days before we went back into reserve and to recalibrate. I call it recalibrate. Bring everything up to date. Make sure you got everything you should have. To get all the reinforcements you need. That was 56 days before we did that. But that time was August.
How much of a threat was the Luftwaffe?
We saw the Luftwaffe the first couple of days we're in. They come over the first thing in the morning and they'd drop a few bombs and fire it and turn around and head back to Germany because there's so many Spitfires around. We had to patrol up Spitfires and Typhoons and American Thunderbolts, and they were constantly surveying. So it had to be a bit of a risky guy in a German plane. They'd come over at dawn, the very first thing. They plan it so they start off in the dark. It hit there just to the worst part of dawn is that 1 hour before it becomes daylight. They'd strafe and drop bombs and head back. I just saw one got hit, but I never saw him crash.
What was it like when France was finally liberated?
France? Of course, we passed through France. And we weren't there to do all the celebrating. The troops that come in later on, they got into all the celebrating. But as we went through, we didn't get into much celebration, except for the local people. They'd always hand you wine.
So after France, where'd you go after that?
But we went to France in Holland. That's where all the dikes were. And we were always wet. That's just October, and that was started to rain all the time.
So how long were you in Holland for?
Oh, the rest of the war until we got into Germany. The whole winter. We were dug in the wintertime near a place Nijmegen. Outside of Nijmegen is a place called Groesbeek. It's sort of a hilly area, and we were sort of on one side of the hill, a bit of a valley, and the other side there's the Germans were dug in the other side of the hill. So there wasn't much movement during the winter months until February. They planned a big attack. They figured, well, it was going to be that time it would still be dry. What had happened about a day or so before, down come the rain and everything was mucky. So the tanks and everything bogged down. So the whole shebang, instead of taking a day or two, it took about a week or two to go someplace. There's muck everywhere. People dug in boats, trucks and tanks were bogged down. They used two tanks to pull another one out. Yeah.
Can you tell me about can you tell me about this attack?
Attack? Well, we were supporting, the mortars. When the infantry were ready to go in, we always had news of what we're supposed to do. And the sergeants in charge. The one time I got promoted up to a sergeant, later on, uh, you direct a mortar fire behind you. They're dug in behind, and there's what they call a mobile fire control. He was dug into a trench. There'd be two mortars in front of him, and he get the orders from the radio from you, and he convey the orders to the mortars, and they do the firing. Then we got word that there was no, you weren't to fire any more artillery, but a week before, week or so before, we weren't to fire our mortars anymore because they feel that the Germans are going to surrender and so on. That was about May, April, May. Yeah.
Going back a little bit, can you tell me the story of how you lost your hearing?
Oh yeah, it's more than once. Uh, well, the biggest blast was in Carpet Cave, where the shell landed so close and it knocked us out. All I hear is a flash, and I couldn't hear for a bit. I went back. They cleaned my ears out. They washed out the ears. There's a bit of stones in some ears, and so they cleaned it out. So it'll come back. It'll come back in a little while, and it never really come back all the way. Then I got another time. I got blown through a window in Holland. I got cut in the open. I had to run like mad to get away from the shell fire, and I got one foot in the windowsill. I got ducked down and the shell landed behind me. I just remember a flash. That was it. They told me, the guys in the room, so they blew me across the room underneath the bed. The beds are inside the wall. And you pull the door open, and there's a bed. It blew me underneath the wall, underneath the bed. And they dragged me out. And the last thing I remember when I flash, next thing I'm sitting in the regimental aid post. I'm sitting there with a cup of tea. I don't know how the hell I got there, but they told me they dragged me out. They had a jeep ambulance. They put me on the jeep. They took me out to the regimental aid post. And apparently they said, "Oh, everything's all right. Your hearing come back. Give me a cup of tea." And I just stayed there for about a day or so because they always had good food at the regimental aid post. And I then went back to the platoon. But they wanted to send me back to the hospital. But I thought, well, what the hell? I wanted to be with the gang, because I didn't think there was anything wrong. I figured the hearing come back, but it didn't come back. It didn't come back completely. I had to get when I used to be giving orders to fire when at mortars. I was up in the front. And you had to have the earphones on to give the talk. So what I did is I always kept one ear open. So I couldn't hear in that one. So this one I have the hearing phone half in and half off. So I could hear them talking because I couldn't hear in this ear anymore. I said it would come back. It never come back. And this one I lost some in that ear too, but not as much.
Tell me about when the war ended for you.
Beg your pardon? Oh, the war ended. Oh yeah. I was a sergeant that time, and we were in a little place, a small village, and we had a we were allowed to go into the town, and at that time we'd go inside the houses that were empty, and we'd have a place to bivouac. We have a place to play cards or do something. Then we had things were pretty easy for about a week or two, and the shelling ended, and so on and so forth. So it became much quieter. And that was about the 8th of the 8th of May, getting close to the 8th of May. Yeah. And I was in this house, we're stationed in this house, and a guy come up, one of the men come over and he says, Sergeant, he said, there's a big trick out here. He wants to know what he has to do with all these rifles and all the ammunition. So I went out and I said, okay, drop down the door. He dropped down the back door of the house. There's all these pistols, Lugers and Brownings and so on, and binoculars. So I said to the guy, I said, go and tell the boys, come on out here. We each grabbed the Luger and a Browning. The Browning is a Belgium Luger. Yeah. I got a Browning Luger and a regular Luger, German Luger. And I got a set of binoculars and a few other items. The binoculars were stolen 2 days later. Somebody swiped them on me. I don't know where they went. So I found another pair. So one of the pairs of sniper, I also found another pair. I went into the back house and I was looking through there's nothing in there. There's no thing. So I walk in and they're sitting on the kitchen window, right in the corner, with a set of binoculars sitting. And the guys missed it. So I ended up getting a pair of binoculars. I ended that pair, I ended up bringing back home. And my brother had stayed in the army. He took them with him to Camp Shiloh in Manitoba. And somebody swiped it off in Camp Shiloh. Yeah. They swiped a Luger and a Browning off them as well. And you couldn't keep the Luger unless you had to keep the firing pin. They turned it into battalion headquarters. You weren't allowed to have a firing pin in the Luger. So you took the firing pin and they kept the track. It was supposed to be a souvenir, you know. And I remember seeing this one house, there's 3 or 4 girls that had the hair shaved off because they collaborated with the Germans when the Germans were there. You can't really blame them, because they're only teenagers, 17, 18, and the only people they knew were German soldiers, and they're young guys and young girls. They got acquainted, so the local population knew who they were. They took them aside and shaved their hair off. You know? One girl was so upset she ran up to the top of a building and jumped off. Yeah, it was crazy. That was a funny time. Yeah.
What was it like when he got discharged?
Oh, right. Let's see. I got to dig back. Yeah. That was October the 5th, 1945. Yeah. I actually should have stayed in a little longer because I got out and I had no job for about what they call for about 3 months, 4 months, and they had they gave veterans what they call the no work benefits, $11.52 a week. That's what they give you because you couldn't find a job. But sometimes you got to find a job and didn't tell them, so you got the 11.52 plus your job, so you made enough to live on for a bit, you know.